Joe Posnanski, welcome back to the Bookshelf Conversations.
It's good to be back because if I'm here, that means I've written a baseball book. So life is obviously good.
I was looking it up and just seeing the last posting, the posting of the conversation for your first book was exactly 2 years ago. October
Wow.
4th, that's when I posted it. October 4th, we spoke before then, of course, but that's when I posted it. So, which is the first question I have is the timing of the release of the book. Last time it was in September, and this time again in September. Why at the end of the season versus the beginning of the season? And before you answer, I just want to say since we did talk about the baseball 100 in depth last time, and we will talk about the new book in depth this time. I want to talk a little bit more about the process. So if you could talk about the decision to release it at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think with the baseball 100, I don't remember it being strategized that way. I think the feeling was based on the timing of when I finished the book and what we had. We couldn't do it for opening day. This is my memory of it. We couldn't do it for opening day, so we thought, well, the best if you're not going to do it on opening day, the best time to do it is right about when the playoffs are about to start, sort of leading in to the baseball playoffs. So I think if I remember it right, the baseball 100 was late September, I believe. I think it really was just a couple of weeks before, maybe even a week before the playoffs
Yeah,
started.
if I
And
remember, it was September 28th.
yeah, that sounds right. I thought it was sort of the end of September. And then this one was actually that was, and it's not my decision. It's the decision of the publishing house. But I think strategically, what they were thinking about was it's probably going to be sort of a gift book. September is a good time leading into the baseball playoffs, so you'll get a couple of different sort of bites at the apple, I guess. You've got the launch, which hopefully will be pretty good. Then you'll have the start of the playoffs, which hopefully will bring a little bit of buzz to it, and then obviously all the way to the holidays and hopefully getting some gifts. So I think it was from a marketing standpoint. I think they thought, this is even better. Start of baseball season is great too because that leads into Mother's Day and Father's Day. So I mean, it's not like that's not a good time, but I think their thought was that this was the sort of book that they thought would go really well into the holidays.
But while you were writing the baseball 100, did that kind of lead into this while you were doing your research for that? Did you say, "Oh, I'm going to make a note of this. This could be used for something else"?
Not exactly. I wouldn't say like while I was writing it, but I will say that this book definitely comes out of the baseball 100, and more to the point, I think the response that I got from the baseball 100. I think I'm sure we talked about it. When we talked about the baseball 100, everything about that was a surprise to me. I mean, literally every single thing. The fact that it was a success, the fact that it was a bestseller, the fact that it just sort of had this great run. To me, I mean, I was thrilled and I thought it was a good book and I was very happy about how it went, but it was so big. It was such a, it was a baseball book, which, we know the challenges of that. And it was 850 pages and so on and so on. So everything was a surprise. But the biggest and coolest surprise was how many people I heard from. And I mean, we're talking countless people who wanted to tell me what baseball meant to them based on that book. They were like, oh, you know what? I got to see Willie Mays play, or I got to see Roberto Clemente. And let me tell you about it. Let me tell you about when my dad took me to my first game. Let me tell you about the first time I went to Dodger Stadium. And it was an on and on. And that was the inspiration for this book. The inspiration for this book was, you know, is there more to write after an 850 page baseball book? And it was like, yeah, there is, because what I want to write, and I had the title in mind, what I want to write is Why We Love Baseball. I want to get at that. And that book was a lot of different things as I was starting. If you want to talk about the process, it was a list, and then it was a history. It was a lot of different things. And it ended up being this collection of moments because of the way people were. Everybody who would talk to me about what the baseball 100 and what baseball means to them would have a moment and it was usually very, very personal. And I thought, this is what I want to write. I want a collection of these moments that really capture what baseball means to us. So the baseball 100 very clearly went into this book. I mean, it was the response to that book that led directly to this book. But I wouldn't say it so much that I've had sort of moments that I came across when I was doing research and thought, oh, this will be good in another book. I would say that's been true probably forever. I've just sort of been a collector of these kinds of moments and things. Like if I see something and I think, oh, that's really neat, I'll write it down, I'll put it in my notes app on the phone, and later maybe I'll come back to it. And so a lot of these moments, um, there are at least segments of them that were things that I've just been collecting for years.
Now, as you're doing this, you mentioned I'm thinking about the format of the book. Where are you saying that it could have been in a different format?
Oh, many different formats. I actually wrote some version of an outline of at least 5, 6, 7 different formats. This format was the hardest one for me to ever to come up with for any of my books. Usually, structurally, my mind is very and it seems very simple now. So it's not. I realize, and maybe that's the way it should be. I realize somebody would be like, well, this is the obvious way to do it. If you're going to do a book like this, you would count down the greatest moments. That's pretty easy. But it really wasn't like that. I had a chronological book in mind. I had a book that was going to sort of be divided into sections of what we love about baseball, and then there would be some moments within those sections. It was a lot of different things, and it took me, my editor will tell you, it took me months and months to really feel good about the structure. And once I got the structure, the book was a breeze to write. I mean, it
Hmm.
was wonderful. It was a everyday joy of trying to find these moments and learn about them and learn about the people involved and learn about something maybe that'll surprise people and so on and so on and so on. But yeah, the hardest part for me was the format. It could have been a lot of different things.
One of the things I noticed in reading through the book is I went to YouTube a lot. I would read something and then I want to see what you're talking about. And of course, it's a lot easier to find things that are more recent than some of the other things. Now, you mentioned you hear from a lot of people. I'm curious, and you must get a sense from the kind of moments they describe, the age of the people who are contacting you. Because one of the things that I noticed in this book is that there's a generational element. A lot of these things are much more recent. Uh,
Mhm.
and for them to be included in the 50 moments, and to be honest, there are a lot more than 50 moments,
Right.
thankfully. It's a lot more quite enjoyable to see the ancillary moments. But uh, some of the new things uh, are kind of surprising. And again, just as in the Baseball 100, there's going to be a lot of, as you say, disagreement. There's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of debate over why this should come before this. Uh, One of the things I disliked when I was doing research for this is somebody spoiled what the number one moment was,
Right.
and that's even when you write the table of contents, that's a potential problem because
Right.
people don't have the attention span. They might want to skip right to the end. But talk about a bit the people you hear from, the generational aspects of this.
Yeah, I mean, being honest, I mean, I would always expect to hear from people my age or older, when it comes to baseball, because I mean, it feels like we were, and even I'm young enough that there was a generation before me that really feels like they were in the golden period of baseball, grew up in the golden era of baseball. And so you hear from them. I've been really gratified by how many young people I've heard from on this book already. And the book's only been out, for 3.5 weeks. But kids. I've heard from a lot of kids on this book, maybe more than I even heard from on the Baseball 100, at least early on, who wanted to talk about Shohei Ohtani, but they also wanted to talk about their favorite moment involving Mookie Betts or involving Ronald Acuna Jr. or somebody currently playing, and asking, oh well, could you have put a moment for them in there, which I love. I mean, I really do love baseball, and I know that baseball's, strength is going to be in how many young people it can bring to the game. That's always the story. But there is a very much a generational element. What has been incredibly satisfying for me is I hear from a lot of families. So I'll hear from a dad talking about his kid, his son or his daughter. But I'll also hear from, you know, adults who talk about their dads or their moms. So I've actually had people come up to me. I've had 3 generation families come up to me during book signings to talk about, the game from one. It was in St. Louis, and it was a grandfather, a father, and a son, and they came up to me. It was really cool, and I asked the son, the youngest one, who was probably 11, if that, who his favorite player was, and he said Stan Musial, and I just thought
Wow.
that was so cool.
Uh-huh.
Because there was his grandfather who had seen Stan Musial play, and passing that along. So I mean, that's baseball. There's such a generational quality to baseball. I mean, I'm writing a football book now, and there is very much a generational quality in football too, in that, we've had Giants season tickets since, for 50 years and this, that, and the other, but it's more pronounced in baseball for sure. And that's really interesting. I mean, certainly baseball fanhood skews a little bit older. I think everybody knows that. Certainly it's something that baseball has had to work with. But I've really been gratified by how many young people have come up to me on this book.
Well, let's stay with the generational aspect for a minute. If this book, even not by you, if a book like this had been written 20 years ago, I imagine at at least the order of some of these things would be very different. I mean, first of all, obviously you wouldn't have some of these moments because they
Right.
wouldn't have happened yet. But I mean, you always hear about the signature moments, the shot heard around the world, Jackie Robinson's debut, Mickey Mantle's hitting the
Sure. The
563-foot
the
home
tape
run,
the
all
tape
those
measure home
things.
run. Right, right.
Uh, so I guess if you come back in 20 years and write a second edition of this, if you're going to wait that long, things will be different. Things are
Yeah, very
always
much so.
changing.
It's always changing. I mean, in 20 years, this book might be just 50 Shohei Ohtani moments, right? I mean, we don't really even know. You're right. One of the things that I really learned while writing the Baseball 100 was there were many, many lists at the end of the 20th century, written in 1999, that were like the 100 greatest players ever
Mhm.
in baseball. And what you saw with those lists were, at least in my mind, they were stagnant because they were kind of all the same. There was just this sense of it, and they're not wrong. Of course, these were the greatest players, but it was always Ruth, and then Mays, and then this. I mean, it was a very, very clear order. And those were most of the lists that had been done that I was looking at. And of course I had 20 years beyond that, and all the great players that were there in those 20 years. But also we've thought more about some of those players. We've reconsidered some of those players, or things that have happened in our minds to make us, obviously the Negro Leagues were not included in those days, and whatever. Same thing here. Same thing here. I mean, you're right. I've not seen a list from pre 2000 that didn't have the shot heard around the world as the number one moment. I mean, it was everybody's number one moment. And Gibson's home run, because it was so recent at that time, was
Kirk
kind of
Gibson.
lower. Kirk Gibson, yeah, I'm sorry. Kirk Gibson's home run, in the '88 World Series was lower because it was recent and there was like this anti-recency bias. And so you had Babe Ruth's called shot and you had the homer and the gloaming and you had the like there were moments that from 60, 70, 80 years earlier that sort of stood, really powerfully in people's minds. Um, and so when you're doing the book, and the same way that with the Baseball 100, I wanted to look at it very fresh. I wanted to certainly have the last 20 plus years, not just represented, but really put that in context. And there are several of the top 10 moments that are pretty recent from that perspective. But also, take a look. We know a lot more about the shot heard around the world now than we did, 20 years ago. I mean, there's a whole book, which I'm sure hopefully you interviewed Joshua Prager when he wrote the whole book about them stealing signs and everything else. Again, there's a whole different perspective about Japanese baseball, about the Negro leagues, about things that were different as in our thought process. So, yeah, I mean, time doesn't just change in the sense of that more incredible moments happen, but also the way we look at things changes a little bit. And I think that's why you keep doing these kinds of books and why it will make sense in 10 years, 20 years to do another version of this.
One of the things, not all the moments in your book are dramatic or
Right.
record-setting, and some aren't even real. So
That's
so
right.
why did you decide to include things like, Dottie drops the ball or,
Right. Bugs Bunny
Bugs
striking
Bunny,
out the,
right?
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, the Jose Canseco header home run did actually happen, but
Right.
that was a funny moment. So it's nice that you have these breaks, these extras.
Yeah, I had a very clear mission. Once I came up with the concept of the book and the real structure of it and how I was going to write it, I had a very clear vision, which you have to have. And it is, again, not to bring up the football book again, but because I'm right in the middle of it, I'm trying to get that clear vision of the football book. I don't have it yet. And I'm trying to get that same clear vision. The clear vision of the baseball book was the title. Every moment I asked it, is this why we love baseball? This wasn't these aren't the 50 most important moments. These aren't the 50 most dramatic moments. These are the 50 moments plus, as you mentioned, another 58 moments that I throw in there in various places, um, that explain why we love baseball or get at the heart of why we love baseball. And so for me, there are incredibly, incredibly important moments that are not in this book. I mean, which I've had many people already say, "How is this not in this book? How is the Chris Chambliss home run from the '76 playoffs not in this book?" Right?
Similar
And
to the issues you had with the top 100.
exactly, which is good. I mean, that's what I mean. I say even in the book, and I really believe it. This is a conversation, and I want people to come at me with whatever their own personal views are, which is great. But to me, it's like the Bartolo Colon home run. That it doesn't mean anything. It didn't matter in the game, but why we love baseball, it's like one of the top reasons moments why we love baseball. So for me, that made it a lot easier to put in a lot of these fun moments, quirky moments, fictional moments, like you mentioned. Um, there are moments in here that are very, I think, emotional moments, but they weren't important in the grand sense of things. They weren't pennant winning moments. They weren't playoff moments. They weren't even necessarily moments that involved good teams. But the John McDonald home run for his father is to me why we love baseball. I mean, that's at the very heart of it. And so that was nice. I really, I think as a writer, at least for me, sort of the key is feeling like you have a guiding, like a North Star that you're just following. And my least favorite kind of writing is when I don't feel like I have that. And I feel like I'm kind of just sort of wandering through the desert a little bit and I'm just writing, but I don't know exactly where I'm heading. And I don't like that feeling nearly as much as I like writing them when I'm like this, and I'm like, hey, I'm writing Why We Love Baseball. I'm not writing, the 50, the 50, most dramatic home runs ever hit or anything. I'm writing Why We Love Baseball, and that can take me in whatever direction it takes me. But it's a very, it gives me, that's in a lot of ways why I kind of feel like this is a very, very personal book. I think I told you this when you texted me, or you sent me an early note about this book, which was very kind. And I sent you back and I said, that I'm really anxious to see how people respond to this book. And you kind of were like, well, come on. I mean, I mean, you're coming off the Baseball 100, you should be fine. But this book is really emotional to me. And it's because I had this North Star that this book was not going to be just a list of great moments or great stories. It was going to be why we love baseball. And I think that's sort of where my head was the whole time.
As you know, and as a lot of my readers know, I try to match the hat to the interview. And the Joe McDonald story is the reason I'm wearing the Toronto Blue Jays hat,
This,
because that, and I think the name is kind of slipping out of my mind, but it was a D. Gordon
D.
who hit
Gordon
the home
Strange's home
run
run, yeah, for
after his teammate died. Those are the really, I mean, I'm getting choked up just thinking about
yeah,
about those. But
yeah. Me too. Me too. No, I mean to me, hopefully a book that people will love and treasure, at least in my experience as a reader, are books that will take you through all the different emotions. And there are very, very, very funny books I've read that don't necessarily stay with me. I love them when I'm reading them. They're funny, but you move on. There are very, very sad books I've read that have really touched me emotionally, but I'm done with them and I sort of move on. It's those books that take you from laughter to this emotional side and all spaces in between that stay with me. And not to feel like, hey, I want this book to stay with people forever or anything like that, but as an author, I think you're trying to do something that will leave a little bit of a spot in somebody's heart, just have a little space in there. And so for me it was incredibly important to get moments like Bartolo Colon and the ball bonking off of Jose Canseco's head, and the foul balls that David Hulse hit, and all of the very funny things, but also these incredibly heart moving, touching moments like John McDonald home run and D. Gordon Strange. And I mean those are the two sides of what it is we love about this game.
I'm curious. You have over 100 moments here. What can you think of one or two that were like just barely ended up on the cutting room floor?
Oh gosh, there's so many of them. Yeah,
Mhm.
I left more on the cutting room floor for this book than any other book I've ever written. Fully written essays that did not make it into this book. Um, the Mike Piazza 9/11 home run is not in the book. And there's a very specific reason. And again, it was an essay that I mostly wrote and finished. Um, but I have the Derek Jeter Mr. November home run in here, and I just felt like I was repeating myself a little bit. And I thought this will stand for the Piazza home run is an incredible moment in American history. But for me, the one that I think of because I was there and because of the importance was the Derek Jeter home run, on November 1st, just after midnight, while Ground Zero smoke was still coming out of Ground Zero. Um, I left out the Len Barker perfect game. I wrote a full complete essay on the Len Barker perfect game because it was so meaningful to me. I grew up in Cleveland, and that was the greatest sort of moment of my childhood, and a great baseball moment. It was the first perfect game thrown in the American League since Don Larson. So it was a definitely a great moment on a cold, dreary, rainy day in Cleveland. But I left that out because I had already put in my favorite Cleveland moment growing up, which was Dwayne Kuiper's one home run. So I didn't feel like I'm like, I've already done this. I don't feel like I have the can take two moments. I can only get one moment for myself. Um, and there were a few others. I mean, like I said, I really did leave a whole bunch on the cutting room floor. And I mean, I think that sort of speaks to how excited I was to write this book. I just kept writing moments, even times there were times that I was like, I don't even think this is going to make it in the book, but I want to write it because it's super interesting. And I've actually released a couple of those moments for people who pre-ordered. I sent a couple of them out, but at some point I'll have to do some sort of addendum because of these. I've got
Mhm.
these essays lying around that I left out of the book.
Now, you mentioned that you were there for the Barker game. Uh, it reminds me, and it's probably in your book, and I've seen it in countless other uh, books or remembrances. The golden age of baseball happens when you're about 10 years old. I mean, my
Yes.
golden age
Yes.
is going to be a little bit different than yours because of the people I saw, the people you see, the people the 11-year-old, that 11-year-old saw, even though he does refer to Musial. Uh, so yeah, I think that's one of the things that keeps baseball for people like me so relevant because there are always books about what happened, why it's important, and that's one of the things I've always appreciated about this book and the Baseball 100 is the you don't use superlatives in the title, and you mentioned that you don't say these are the best moments, these are the best players, and that's always been one of my bugaboos is like the best this, the best that. Well, it's the best right now, but it's not always going to be the best because something
Right.
similarly the use of the word complete. It's never going to be
Yeah.
complete until there's no more of whatever the topic is, until there's no more baseball. And if there's no more baseball, I mean, to me, that's the end of the world. So that's the
Oh, no
apocalypse.
question. Yeah, no, I've noticed, I mean, I certainly have noticed that there are many, many, many books, particularly in sports, but really in every walk of life, where it's the best or it's the last. That's the other big one. The last hero, the last this, the last superstar, the last. And some of those are incredible books. I just don't love the title. I don't
I
know.
certainly hope not.
Yeah,
That
I was
the
hoping that
last of
nothing
something.
is, I would hope nothing is the last, right? I mean, that's that we keep moving on and keep finding new ways. So, yeah, I mean, one thing I've always, certainly with these two books, with the Baseball 100 and with Why We Love Baseball, is I never wanted to overpromise anything. Like I never wanted to say the Baseball 100 is the authoritative greatest 100. It's not. Of course, it's not. Hopefully, it's authoritative in the writing. Hopefully, the stories are authoritative. I think that's what most people have gotten out of it, which I love. Is that they're like, I just love reading about these people. It doesn't matter to me the order or whatever. There are plenty of other people who all that matters to them is the order, and they want to argue about that, and that's fun too. But I somebody came up to me the other day because there's still lingering Baseball 100, obviously, and said, I loved your book, but it's a joke that Eddie Murray is not in the Baseball 100. It's just a joke that he's not in there. And I said, you know what? I totally agree with you. I do. Eddie Murray belongs in the Baseball 100. Of course he does. And I said, and what I'm counting on you to do is write your own 100 players, and you put Eddie Murray as high as you want. And I wasn't saying that to be sarcastic or anything like that. I was being completely serious in that his list is every bit as legitimate as my list. I mean, all of our lists are we can all defend anything that we want. And so all I'm saying is this is my best shot at hopefully giving you something really entertaining to read. And I put a lot of effort into putting an order to this and all of that, but I'm not telling you I'm right. I'm just telling you this is what I got.
and what you've got is a lot of fun. We've been talking with Joe Posnanski, author of the New York Times best-selling book, Why We Love Baseball: A History in 50 Moments. Joe, as always, thanks again for talking with us today and continued enjoyment and success.
Thank you very much.